Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and blog. Today I have a card for my Encouraging Card series. This is card number 21, and this also fits the Color Throwdown Challenge number 516, which is the colors dark teal, rust, and cream. So let's go ahead and get started on this card. I'm going to be using the Simon Says Stamp Picture Book Donut die, along with several other Simon Says Stamp products. And I'm grabbing my Sizzix Sidekick, along with my little donut die, and I'm going to run that through the Sizzix Sidekick a couple times. I'm using that with the rust, and this rust color is a Stampin' Up! Really Rust. I don't know if they make that anymore, but I'm just using what I have in my stash. And I'm also going to I'm going to run that through using the Nina Desert Storm cardstock, so that I'll have like almost like a pumpkin spice donut along with a little coffee crumble cake. To make my donut look like it is glossy, like frosting typically would, I am going to tape a little backing piece to my little donut top where the frosting would be, and I am covering that with some Versamark ink. And then I'm going to cover that with some clear embossing powder. And then I'm going to heat set that. And the only reason why I made the little handle is basically so I don't burn myself when I heat set that, and also it keeps my hands from getting sticky and getting the embossing powder all over it as well. So that's just a little hack. I taped that to the back with some washi tape. And then once that cools a little bit, I'm actually going to cover that with the Versamark ink once again. And that Versamark ink is just a sticky ink. It's a sticky clear ink. And then I'll cover that one more time with that clear embossing powder. And you could probably cover this 3-4 times, depending on how thick and glossy you wanted it to be. So it's pretty glossy at this point, so I'm pretty happy with that. And now I'm going to start kind of assembling that donut. So I saw Amy R. from Prairie Paper and Ink do this with her storybook characters. She covers the backs with some washi tape, and then she sticks all the pieces in that way. And my little eyes were still stuck in the donut die, so I stuck that over the top and used my paper piercer to put the eyes where I needed those to be. So I'll just use more washi tape to stick the bottom, the little cake part of my donut down. And the washi tape makes it nice because I can stick that down, and if it's not exactly where I need it to be, it's just washi tape, so I can peel that up fairly easily too. Another easy way to assemble these is just to make a backing out of like some computer paper. So I'll just continue to cover that with that washi tape, and then I'll set him off to the side. After I've colored his eyes, I'm going to start with a Copic multi-liner, but then I end up discovering that it didn't cover it very well, so I'll grab my black Copic marker, which is just the 100 Copic, which is pure black, and then I will cover that. And then I'll grab a white gel pen to give him some little whites to the dots of his eyes, and set that off to the side to make sure that that dries pretty well. Now I'm going to grab the Simon Says Stamp Dude die. When I first saw this, this was an absolute must, because, funny story, my mom likes to call my son Dude. It started out with Doodlebug, but then it just went to Dude, and so they each have a name for each other. She calls him Dude, he calls her Graham, so this card's probably actually going to be for my son. And I am running that through using some, I believe it's the Simon Says Stamp Island Indigo, and again, I don't know if this stuff is still available. I ran that through 3 times, and then for the backing piece, I ran that through with some Desert Storm. So that's just the shadow dude. And I will assemble the 3 Island Indigo pieces together, so it'll make it look a little bit more like a chipboard. And I had left the first one inside the original paper, but that isn't necessary unless you're using a die that has pieces that are really thin and flimsy. But this one is actually pretty sturdy, so it wasn't necessary. So I just put all 3 of those together using some craft tacky glue. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing with that as I did the donut frosting. I want this to be shiny, make it look like it's enamel almost, so there's some cohesion. And so I'll cover that with that Versamark ink, and then cover that with that clear embossing powder, and then heat set that, and I'll do that a couple times. And I just really love the way this ends up looking. This just looks like a beautiful, beautiful enamel covered chipboard piece. I mean, it's just like this whole other element. It's so neat that you can end up doing that with your dies. And so I imagine you could do this with just about any die you have in your stash. So give it a try. The effect is so pretty, and I'll show you here in a second. I love how shiny it is. And so I'll let that cool just a second, and then I'll peel off that little paper. And now I'll make my card base, which is that same Nina Desert Storm, and that was an 11-inch piece by 4 1/4, and I just scored that at 5 1/2 inches. And then I have a piece of cream cardstock that I used my Favorite Things Stitch rectangle stacks. I used my biggest one on that, and I ran that through my Big Shot machine. And now I want to add another little sentiment. But first I'll attach the blue dude to the shadow backing. And I'm using that craft tacky glue all over the back of that. And then I'll adhere it, and then I'll show you in the light just how cool this thing looks. It's such a neat element. How pretty that is. And then for my sentiment, I'm using some of that same Island Indigo. And I'm using the Simon Says stamp Messages for Every Day. And I just found a sentiment in there that I really liked. And I'm going to ink that up with some Versamark ink, stamp that down, and then I will cover that with some white embossing powder. And then I will heat set that just until it's melted. I'd use my embossing buddy over the top of that first, just to make sure that the embossing powder wouldn't stick anywhere I didn't want it to. And then I will trim that down using my Fiskars wire paper trimmer. And then I'm going to start assembling everything. So I'm cutting that at an angle. And then I decide I really like the stitching around that cream panel. So I am going to run that same die over the top of my sentiment so that there's some cohesion there. And then I'll start adhering everything. And I'm using my Tombow adhesive all over all the pieces for now. And then those pieces are a little bit bigger, potentially a little heavier, so I'm going to use that craft tacky glue on those to make sure that they stay put. I love how that says everything will be all right. My son is in AIT right now, so he is having tests just about every other day. And so I'm just trying to encourage him to keep going. So there's the encouraging card for the day, for the week. And I'll adhere the dude down. And once all that's adhered, I'm going to finish that off. My final bit of embellishment will be the Nuvo Crystal Drops in the color Auburn Pearl. I really like those. I thought those were a nice little touch. And once I'm done putting those all over, that is going to finish off this card. So if you liked it, hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed, please do so that you don't miss anything. And I'm going to have everything listed down below that I used. And so, as always, thanks for stopping by.